Why does beauty matter? That sort of question I was afraid of.
That's a big question. Wow, that's a difficult question.
Hello and welcome, people of the internet, at this very special film screening of the newest documentary of Mies TV of the Tallinn Architecture Biennale called Why Does Beauty Matter? Welcome to all of you. We at Mies TV, we've already been doing quite a few live streams in the last weeks, and this one is maybe like another international one, so to say. Maybe just before we start about what we show, just about who we are. We're Mies TV. I think most of you might know us already. We're an international architecture platform of students and young architects all around the world. Vienna, Paris, Mexico City, London, and many more. And together we sort of want to bring non-architects and not yet architects some interesting topics and insight into the world of architecture. And so then last year we got approached by the Tallinn Architecture Biennale. So Tallinn, like Venice, also has a Architecture Biennale, and last year was another year of the Biennale. And we were asked to we were approached by them to make sort of a documentary. And sort of Paula and me, together with Chiara and Teresa from Vienna, we went to Tallinn. And Paula, what did we do there?
So Beauty Matters was the title of last year's Tallinn Architecture Biennale and was curated by Yael Reisner. It was based on her research and book about, as she says, troubled relationship between architecture and beauty. We interviewed participants of the symposium and exhibition that was part of the Biennale, and we're asking architects, but also a philosopher, a mathematician, a neuroscientist, and a musician. Why does beauty matter? And we did this together with students of the Estonian Academy of Fine Arts. Thank you, Marian, Samuel, Sarah, William, and Wimke.
Yes, so we came back from Tallinn, from Estonia, full of interviews, and sort of we crammed everything together in a documentary where we talk about beauty. And maybe even now, in this time of quarantine, you might ask, but do we really need to talk about beauty in these days? I mean, aren't there like bigger problems? Why should we talk about beauty? And we are very, very happy to not only be able to show you the documentary today, but to also welcome the curator, Yael Reisner, as Paula said, today, who will be joining us for a Q&A. So this means that you can ask your questions to the curator of the Biennale in the comment section below, either Facebook or Instagram or YouTube. And Paula and me, we will sort of ask your questions straight to London, where Yael Reisner is based at the moment. And she will then answer your questions live, no matter where you are. And on Instagram, we were already asking you guys where you're watching from, and some of you have already answered, which is amazing. So we have people watching from Iran, we have people watching from Spain, we have people watching from Estonia, or also people watching from Mexico City that might have lunch at the moment and still be watching. And people in Iran, I don't know, it might be already quite late in the night. So thank you all for watching. We already screened the documentary in Austria, we screened it in Estonia, and we also screened it in the UK, also in London at the AA. And today is sort of our live worldwide screening. And yes, so I think, Paula, should we start with the screening?
Yeah.
All right,
Enough
so
of
Dominic,
talking.
please run out our documentary of the Tallinn Biennale 2019 called Why Does Beauty Matter?
Why does beauty matter? That sort of question I was afraid of.
That's a big question. Wow, that's a difficult question.
I'm very aware that most architects don't think that beauty matters. And so it's a very complex issue, and I just wanted to bring it in. I grew up in Tel Aviv, and I grew up in the 50s and 60s as a younger person, and Israel was still a very socialist country, and the look of things didn't matter. Beauty completely didn't matter. It was part of, the culture. But still, what matters is content, not form, not the look of things. There's an expression in Hebrew that says, and it's very common in Israel, don't look at the jar, the vase, but at the content. And the content was important. When I grew up, I said, no, I wanted to do architecture because I wanted to do things with make the world more beautiful. And then when I studied architecture, it was completely irrelevant.
Beauty matters because I think it's quite abstract quite often, which I kind of like. It's really hard to define, and it keeps you questioning what it is. I think it's a really big question, but it is something that when you find it, when you discover it, it gives you the greatest feeling that you can imagine. So I think it means a lot, and that's why so many people are inspired by it.
Wow, beauty is important for our life and for our future. Wow, the beauty and the usefulness could be well integrated, and I'm always trying to make such a beautiful integration.
Well, my profession is about beauty, so mathematicians know. Ask a mathematician why does he do mathematics, and he will answer you with 100% certainty because of beauty. I do mathematics because it's beautiful.
Beauty matters because beauty is the opposite of what I call the literal. The literal includes any form of knowledge, and the only actually two forms of knowledge that exist are either reducing a thing downward to its pieces or upward to its effects. But beauty isn't like that. Beauty has to do with what's intrinsic to a thing, and it's that which is in the thing that is not reducible in either direction.
Beauty matters because, from a neuroaesthetic point of view, because it satisfies the brain. It satisfies in a number of ways.
Of course, it does matter, and it's this kind of, as the head curator Yael Reisner says, this kind of unspoken thing that outside of anyone or any of the creative disciplines, it gets thrown around a lot. You hear people say that things are beautiful every day, usually, but within the creative field, usually not. Okay. It matters because everyone else who's not creating or who's not designing or creating, whatever it might be, buildings or objects or films, or constantly refer to it as a real value for things in their environment. So obviously it does matter in that sense, yeah.
If you put effort into something, I think inherently there's a reward at the end, and within that there's a natural sense of care and in that care comes, you know, love, and within love there's some beauty somehow.
Some people say, beauty matters now? That's so much heavier subject. But actually, they're all important. And I think that good architecture today, if it's not, I think sustainability without beauty is failing. It's not, you know, and I think everybody knows that, because if we tick all the boxes of, you know, building, you know, we tick all the sustainable requirements, if the building is ugly, we're not successful. So people know that. But, you know, if you look at awards and competition and juries and judgments, people don't even know how to talk about beauty. So it's not a category. It's a hidden category because we're still not choosing a terrible looking building that tick all the boxes. But it's so undiscussed and became so kind of irrelevant that we have to bring it back to be able to learn how to talk about it.
Opposite of beauty. Wow, that's a challenging question. Opposite to beauty is?
Politics. Okay, that's really ugly. I mean, that's pretending, it's making shows, lying. Politics is the opposite of beauty.
Yeah, because I like to see the world in a positive way. So even if it is not beautiful yet, well, we can make it beautiful.
The opposite of beauty is not the ugly, but the literal. The literal is the kind of understanding that thinks a thing is nothing more than the qualities it has. Whereas for me, both the beautiful and the ugly have to do with splitting the easy relationship between an object and its qualities. So they have a kind of tension between them.
The opposite of beauty. Well, I'm not sure it has one. The opposite of beauty is certainly not ugliness, even though we do find interesting correlations, but also very interesting differences in terms of brain activity during reports of beauty and during reports of ugliness.
I carry this subject with me for quite a while. There is a troubled relationship between architecture and beauty. So beauty became an empty word. It's sort of bourgeois, not progressive. You know, it has all the bad connotation. And I think it's still there because the cultural bias is so deep. At the end, I think every architect in his heart knows that beauty matters.
Architecture is a bit complicated thing, and you have to include lots of people into it. If you're designing a huge building, then there are tens and tens of people who are influencing the process. And if you make a piece of art, then you can do it almost alone. And no one is bothering you. And you make the choices. Not the ventilation guy, not the energy calculator, not the construction engineer, not the client. You don't have the client, you are the client. So that's why I like that personal approach in that matter.
Of course, beauty is very important, but beauty is not the only one priority of architecture design. For me, I feel beauty come out through the integration of the whole complexity of the world into one architecture in a very simple ideas, but creating such a diversity. And so in the process, starting point, I respect the whole complexity of the world, the complexity of the project and the situation, and listen to everything in a sense, and then try to find out how we can, integrate. Even though the whole situation is very nicely complex and diverse, finally we have to make one project. So this is kind of the process of the integration, but not simplifying the situations, like keeping the richness of the complexity and try to find the amazing viewpoint through which we can see the whole world really harmonized.
The use value of a building should be aestheticized. Immanuel Kant didn't think architecture was a very high form of art because it's contaminated in a certain sense with usefulness. But I think usefulness can also be aestheticized in its own right.
Generally, the idea is that artifactual category is dependent upon the biological category, and we might at first want to assign architecture to an artifactual category and keep it there. But if we look at how the brain responds to architecture and the way it responds to biological beauty, there are many more similarities than we might at first expect. And so, unlike, say, furniture design or tool design, architecture fulfills a very interesting middle ground between the extremes of biology and sort of like machinery.
It is difficult to speak about beauty, to have a conversation about it, because we consider it a very subjective matter. More and more there is attempts to try to find what is it and to try to find a common ground from the field of neuroscience or the field of psychology. However, I mean, I don't think one needs to create a universal rule.
I'm going to say something quite terrible, but I really think it's true. For people to change their mind, or if we want people to believe in something we feel it's right, but it's fresh and new, it takes sometimes a whole generation to die, to have the next generation to take it for granted. When a cultural bias is very deep, it takes more than a day or 2 months to change to change the feeling, the thoughts, the responses, because people act against the terrible beauty for so long that you don't just say, now it's fashionable to think this way. It's not. It's something much deeper. It's not a style or a trend or trend, or it's something really deep in the way we think. It's really part of our culture.
This is not necessarily something that you search for. You not say, here you go, this is the project that we're presenting and it's beautiful, because it seems to be a status quo.
Yeah, when I was a student of university, in the summer holiday, I made the round trip of Europe. And the first place was Paris. I landed in the morning time. And then I took a train to come into the center of Paris, come out from the enter of the subway onto the street. And then I was really impressed by the beauty of the city of Paris in the morning sun. That was the moment I still really remember as a really strong reality. Yeah, life and the city itself and the weather, light, and yeah, the combination of everything created such an amazing beauty.
And I take at least 1 month every year completely off from the architecture and go to my favorite place, Tokyo, and stay there for 1 month and walk like 30 kilometers in a day with my camera around the huge chunk of city, the world's largest urban sprawl almost. And that's my vacation, and that's my method to find new things and new beauties.
What I was trying to achieve in terms of the exhibition is to, there was a task for the different exhibitors. So I selected the architects, and they got a task, right, which was to come up with habitation projects, right, because the plan was to look at beauty through the lens of habitation. I was very keen to wrap it all up with a certain atmosphere that enhanced the expression of aesthetics. The vision for habitation today or tomorrow It's not anymore the image of metropolis, the 1930s, you know, the kind of New York with the airplanes and all the different transportations and all very mechanical and all of that, the new technologies of the past, but actually a lot more nature. The intention was to enhance a certain atmosphere, which was very important for me. And then we got another thing, which we were lucky to apply for a grant to have the VR experience, which is for a lot of us quite interesting. But it's not just the notion, oh, I see a headset, I'm happy to go into the 3D situation. It was really about understanding the projects better. So actually what you experience is to get into the project in a different way than just section plans, renders, 3D on the screen in the upper floor.
In fact, by definition, something being virtual means that it shares the attributes of something without being completely that other thing. Right? By definition, it's referencing something else. So if you have not experienced that something else, you're not fully understanding the virtual experience that you're having.
So the project is called the Venn Room, and it speculates on what our domestic lives and our homes will turn into when AR, augmented reality, becomes something that normal people use every single day. We speculate on that the computer monitor and the smartphone will disappear in common use in the next 15 to 20 years and will be replaced by spatial computing, basically that all the computation platforms that we use from social media to productive software, whatever, will be spatial, and therefore also all of our social activities that are digital.
Augmented reality was particularly appealing because it had a significantly lower barrier to entry, or we worked to create a lower barrier to entry than typically you have with robotics or machine learning, which have a very high technical overhead, and it's very difficult to both teach design and to teach the kind of fundamental knowledge that's required to pursue those topics. Whereas we find that with augmented reality, it's really engaging for people to work with their hands and to be crafting things in a slightly more traditional way while also engaging with the technology behind it.
The pavilion is produced by steam bending timber, and it's a little bit punk in its attitudes towards, say, detailing, which is just not at all important in that project. It's rough and raw. And it's super steampunk in its relationship to technology. You know, we're doing things by hand with old analog tools, but we're using this, like, let's call it like a magical headset which shows you all of the information that you need to construct something wildly complex. I guess we are trying to offer a vision for an alternative way to think about designing and making, though, which is much more democratic. So it opens up the accessibility of digital models to people who maybe aren't digitally literate. And that is I think that's a really important vision, because we're at risk of losing a whole lot of material expertise and knowledge and skills by automating everything or by doing everything through digital modeling.
And it's also very important to keep in mind that what we today call VR or AR is not a technology that came out of nothing. It is a natural progression of virtual media that has been developing since the very first ones. You could even include the non-digital or non-electric ones, such as sculpture and painting. But if we do include the early analog ones, such as photography, and then leading up to the motion picture, the television, and then the computer monitor, they're all the same project. And AR and VR is just the next step.
I guess we don't intentionally try to create work that we don't like. I mean, we like what we do, that's why we do it.
Yeah, I think functionality in itself is something that we probably focus on at an early start. It's like how everything's going to work. And then through the explorations of the meaning and virtually everything that's going to be useful, the beauty somehow emerge.
Our work really looks at simplifying methods and taking craft, but using kind of digital models to find ways in which we can use repetition and use certain kind of technologies to encourage those crafts to make something totally new and unique.
And I think VR and updated technologies such as that may help concretize, help us make more sense of some of these more abstract thought experiments that maybe haven't had that much tooth in other disciplines outside of philosophy. It may help with discourse across disciplines, just to help make sense of those more abstract ways of thinking.
It's a personal project for me. So far it's probably the most personal thing I have ever done in an art form, because it describes the environment which I was growing up, like in more than 10 years. I spent my childhood in a huge housing block of Lasnamäe, which is part of Tallinn, and for some reason it matters to me still.
So I'm here in Tallinn as part of the Tallinn Architecture Biennale to bring a project called Musicity, which is a project I've been developing for the past 8 years. And the idea is that we work with local musicians from Tallinn to each create a piece of music inspired by a different location and a different building. For a long time I was kind of curious about the idea of commissioning music based on architecture. So the idea that you could have a soundtrack to a building. But the secret is, you need a smartphone with our app, and you go to the location and then you can stream the music. So it basically gives you a sense of the building and the musical response to it.
One of the words that we love is ambiguity. And, so effectively, like our work sometimes been described as ugly. And it seems to be surprising for us because obviously we don't really perceive it this way. But with time we actually took it as a compliment.
Who said our work was ugly? Oh, right, yeah. Okay.
Just get that one.
I got further confidence to go about it through findings in neuroscience and talking to mathematicians and other disciplines that actually beauty matters to them. They never stop believing in beauty. The part of the idea of the symposium was one of the ideas there was to bring the neuroscientist, the philosopher, the mathematician, and the poetess to argue and discuss the subject, because they all of them who came in believe in the return of beauty, or in the beauty that never disappeared, or in the importance of it.
I was invited here because I believe strongly that beauty should be at the center of philosophy, and that goes very well with what Yael wanted the conference to be about.
And I am here representing Semir Zeki and the neuroaesthetic point of view and some findings from the UCL Laboratory of Neurobiology.
Mathematics is not a science, it's art. Why is that? Because when things fall into place, that's what happens in mathematics, you're trying to find some order. And when things fall into place, that's beautiful. That's when something just right fits right into the like a puzzle. You find a piece of puzzle that fits just right, you feel it's beautiful. And that's what happens in my profession.
So, and I brought them to make the architects who are not confident about the subject, who still have much deeper cultural bias against it. I hope that these scholars will make them more confident, or just make them think about it. People will say, beauty is a silly thing, it's a nice detail. And that's not beauty. Beauty is, and what we heard in the symposium by different people and different disciplines, beauty is much more profound, and beauty is much harder to get, to achieve, and so, say people refer, they hear beauty because it's so undiscussed, and they think of Renaissance, because Renaissance was talking about beauty and perfection and ideal beauty and all that. It's not the beauty today. So as I keep saying, beauty is not a singular idea. Beauty could be many different things, not things, but different aesthetics. We all know that, we are aware of it. Aesthetics are changing, but we know very well when something is beautiful, when something is not beautiful.
Beauty is about truth, about fitting into the reality. Beauty is about hidden order. There is some hidden order that you find. And this order is something that fits into the picture. In this case, in this sense, it is true. It's truth, about truth.
I think we shouldn't say we have like one beauty and everybody should go for that. This is kind of the misunderstanding, I think. We can find a lot of different beauty, and all of them has kind of amazing values on it.
In the natural world and in the diversity that keeps the natural world coexisting, it's the differences that create those moments of beauty. It is very much a subjective word, which is why I think it's been such an interesting conference, is everyone's got a very different opinion to what beauty might mean.
I think beauty is one aspect of aesthetics. So aesthetics is a larger philosophical discipline that interfaces with other disciplines such as neurobiology. It signifies the stabilization of perception in an otherwise unstable world.
It's a collision of different ideas, and to me the best or the most impressive beauty is when you get disparate things clashing. So a mixing of different ideas and cultures, and that to me is creating the best beauties.
No one can define beauty, but we can categorize. We have a lot of characteristics. So as I keep saying, it's just like love. People understand that we cannot define love in 5 words, but there are lots of characteristics. So I think it's a big subject to come back to.
I don't know what time it is there.
Okay, great.
Okay, Paula, du machst den Anfang, oder?
Okay, welcome. Welcome back again. I wasn't sure if we were live yet or not. And welcome, Yael Reisner. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
My first question to you is, Yael, you're an architect, but you also studied biology. So how does this your personal background influence your work and your research, and how do you integrate different professions in your research?
Right. I think for a very long time I was completely made myself disinterested in biology because I wanted to do architecture. So the whole scientific background, I turned it off. I was completely disinterested for a while, though I was very interested at it for a long time. So for a long time, it was like you won't trace anything there. It's really much later. I think I always notice that I have no fear of science. I have no fear of reading this or that or a paper, which I guess most architects might not feel that comfortable with, or might feel they wish to read, but they don't fully understand. And I don't think I fully understand, because I finished with biology very, very long time ago, but I had no fear. And so I think it came into place really very late. Like in 2014, I think it was. I read something about, I read something about Semir Zeki, who is a very well-known neuroscientist. I watched him before. I put an eye on his research before, but never really took much interest further than just knowing about him. So I started reading his papers. I suggested him to meet up, and these meetings were, we still keep meeting, and so that started 6 years ago and has tremendous influence on me. And then through neuroscience, I realized again and again how mathematics has such a big say on beauty, and the only discipline really that had no. They don't have to return to beauty. They are there. They never stopped being interested in beauty. And they were not part of the cultural bias that any other discipline suffered from. So my interest in neuroscience and mathematics, I think I felt very comfortable looking at these different disciplines while still pressing on the cultural issues of architecture. So that's the only little benefit, I think.
So the theme of the Tallinn Biennale that you decided was Beauty Matters. And also in the documentary, you said that there are many people that says we have so many problems in this world and beauty matters now. And I mean, especially now in this time of like lockdown and everything. Yael, does beauty really matter now?
Yes, I feel it even more so, just as love and touch and, beauty is very similar. Kind of yearning for beauty, because beauty gives us pleasures, and there's no harm in having pleasures. But it's not only pleasures and well-being. It was proved that beauty, the experience of beauty, make us healthier. So we have to take it seriously. And I think I said it a few times already, and some people don't understand why I mentioned that. I think they, sustainability, ecology, climate change, they all will influence the new beauty, as I said. And the beauty is not a singular phenomena, a singular experience. Beauty is quite a pluralistic, deed. And I think it's highly relevant, because beauty, we're talking about something new, something novel. And what should be novel today if it's not related to climate change? So it has to come from there, and it has to include that as well. There's no point in, and also like it's not really knowing. It's only because of cultural bias of so many years thinking, oh, beauty is something little. It's like a little detail, or it's not really relevant, or it's a nice line. No, beauty is by far more profound, as we know from mathematicians, and it's a very important activity, should be part of the creative, process of any architect. And so I don't see any conflicts between, the content or the if you're aiming solving climate change problems and beauty. It's just should be, integrated with each other. So for me, it's all one big pursuit.
Do you have any new perspectives now on beauty? For example, in the exhibition, you were showing different habitation projects. Do you have any new perspectives now on habitation and beauty?
I just think the same, but deeper, more so. So, for example, the installation that Barnaby Gunning, there were just a comment, like half of the exhibitors and participants at the curatorial exhibitions are not at the documentary, because the documentary was there to to tell the story of the whole Biennale, and the curatorial exhibition was only part. But I was working on one of the installations with Barnaby Gunning, and who was not in the documentary, and we did something that growing, we call it growing habitats. So grow stuff, grow relationship, grow everything growing there. But I think the garden, and there were two types of gardens, but the growing stuff, and it was vegetable gardens. I'm trying to grow now vegetables in my garden, because there was a fear that I might not get a delivery, or because I can't keep the lettuce or the green, or I'm lucky to have a garden. But I think every house should have a garden, and that's the future habitation is so important. So I think now we know it even more, how important it is. No one should be deprived of greenery, and of course then it goes with the whole issue of climate change and all of that. So it's all one thing.
What I found super interesting at so the Biennale, it went for several days, weeks even, and for the start there was this big symposium that you curated and you invited. What I found really interesting was that you invited also non-architects to come on stage. And can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think it was a genuine act. I think, every academic today will, make emphasis on interdisciplinary activity. And I think the interdisciplinary in relation to the subject of the return to beauty, or the whatever we call it, the interest in the experience of beauty is genuinely there. Graham Harman is genuinely talking about the return of beauty. The mathematician Ron Aharoni, he's Israeli mathematician. I don't know him because we are both Israelis. I actually have found his book in English in somebody else's library. It's an absolutely fantastic, fascinating book. And that's why I invited him. And he talked about the desire for beauty in poetry and mathematics. The whole book is about poetry and mathematics, so as the same kind of activity. So he was there. It was very important for me in a way because of the mathematician who value poetry so much, to have actually a poet or a poetess. So I invited an Estonian local poetess who was very, I enjoyed her presence a lot. So there was the and of course the neuroscience, because I was highly influenced by the neuroscientist Samir, who Samir couldn't make it then, so he sent one from his lab who had a fantastic presence, Taylor Enoch, who took part in the film. So all this, and deep down I knew all these people, they are really believer in the return of beauty, whereas most of the architects, any architect, they're still kind of uncomfortable with the issue of beauty because of the cultural bias, because the way we are, handling this issue so slowly and all that, and heavily. So there was an intention not just to be interdisciplinary, but to be really influential and to stir the conversation. So I think it was a successful two-day symposium, but you caught some of it nicely. Your documentary, I never, when you interviewed me, I was so exhausted from 3 weeks of, high activity, and almost I just wanted it to go, and I didn't realize that it's going to be part of the documentary. So when you sent me the documentary, the link, I was amazed. I was so thankful. I thought this is like a gift, and I got it in the last week of the Biennale, before it closed down. So yeah, I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we have the first questions coming in from the internet. Keep it up. Ask whatever you always wanted to ask a curator in your life, and especially an architecture Biennale curator. We have the first question coming in on Instagram from the user Wunderformer, and is asking, speaking about a hidden order, does beauty belong to tacit, to implicit knowledge?
That's the question?
Yes.
Yeah, I absolutely believe in that. It's all about tacit knowledge, we call it intuition, we call it gut feelings, we call it, there's a beautiful book, Gut Feeling by Gerd Gigerenzer, who is a German researcher based in Max Planck Institute in Berlin. And the book is actually about his research, but it was sold, it's a bestseller, so everybody can read it. It's very readable. And he talks a lot about, that there's so much more knowledge about all this unconscious processing, that it's all part of the logic we built up. So what we call the tacit knowledge and all that, I guess in the near future, we'll know scientifically a lot more about it. So it's not kind of what was perceived in the past as irrational and kind of dangerous. And it's part of our thinking. It's part of us. So absolutely. And we know also, I think we know it. It's the kind of thing that even if we don't read philosophy or psychology, psychological behavior or all of that, we know it as in our gut, in our heart, in our body. We know when we see something beautiful, it's not always completely clear. When you read a beautiful poem, it touched something subliminally. We can't put our finger on it, and that's how elusive it is. That's the beauty of it. That's the complexity of it. So, and as Graham Harman said, we can't talk really about it. We can't exhaust explaining it. It's he said the enemy of beauty is the literal. So, that's part of the hardship, but we believe in it as in love and the need for it. So yeah. I hope I answered the question.
Elmar Mustafa from YouTube is asking, how can we notice beauty?
How can we notice what?
Beauty. How can we notice beauty?
I think we know it when we see it. When we are in love, we know it when we are in love. So it always reminds me, while I was teaching from, a long time ago when I was teaching at the Bartlett, and there were portfolio reviews, amongst, you see all the teachers together, sometimes the students, sometimes before the students come in, there were different kind of sessions. But it's interesting to report, and it was interesting to observe that you look at different portfolios of different groups, different teaching groups, different tutors who often don't like each other, don't respect each other, compete with each other, right? And you see the portfolios of the different students from the different groups, and we argue about this, we don't like this, we appreciate this. And when something comes really beautiful, everybody is like forgetting all the relationship and interrelationship between the teachers, the students. This is incredible. So it's like, and I think when something strongly is beautiful, there's a, majority. There's a majority for it. When things are not so culturally, we hear so much, talk about, we begin fed up, and it's kind of not, it's arguable. But when something is fresh and really strongly beautiful, it's very easy to know when we see it.
So speaking about fresh and new, your topic of beauty is actually already goes on for quite some time, still very fresh, still very new for a lot of people, because you've been working on the topic before already. So the Biennale in Tallinn, was it for you like the end of this journey, or is it like a middle step for you, or is there something coming?
I hope it's not the end, because I think it's only the beginning. 2010, I was the focus in my book in 2010. The book was published in 2010, and it was about the trouble. I was complaining why there's a troubled relationship between architecture and beauty, between architects and beauty. Why is it so bad? And Wiley, as the publisher, I had a contract with them before writing the book, and they wanted, of course, to have only influential architects, being interviewed, or that's how I did it. I did it by many interviews. There were 16 interviews. There were more, but was reduced to 16. And they're all influential architects. And even that 16, of course, it was my list. I could have a lot more, a lot less. I had to have 250 pages. It had to be these 16 people. And what I did, I took a kind of generational cut. So it's like the older one was Frank Gehry. The younger one at the time was Hernan Diaz Alonso. there is still 40 years between them. But Hernan was Hernan Diaz-London, who right now is the director of SAC. He was the younger. There were 4 digital architects and others who, So I compare the views, the education, why most of them had a troubled relationship with beauty. Not all of them. Zaha was one of the views. She never had a problem with beauty. Odile Deck never had a problem with beauty. Gaetano Pesce, who I think did amazing industrial design and product design, he argued a lot about it, but I think anything he did was really beautiful. So there were lots of different conversations. But then, I evolved with the subject, as I explained before, in 2014, was a kind of, I'm also designer, so in 2014, I had a greater public installation, and sometimes I want to do more, as I did with Barnaby. Sometimes we collaborate, do more projects. So I'm complex. I'm not wearing one hat. I'm not just curator, and I'm not curating that many. It was an opportunity, and I went for it, and I won it. It was great. But I think the subject is really embryonic, because the cultural bias is so deep, it won't go. So I think as long as the cultural bias is there, there's a lot to do about it. There's a lot to talk about it. There's a lot to convince the profession, the architects, to go for it, to give it a chance. Yeah.
What was about the Biennale? Were there any also because you said the bias is so deep? Did you have any visitors having problems with the topic?
Yeah, I was there in the opening week. Then I went back home, and what I could see is, the different journalists, what they wrote. So the Italian journalist of Domus hated it, despised it. He said, there's no point, you're looking at ridiculous things. He was really critical. And it was the first article published about the Biennale. I was so upset. Oh my God, no one will see what I'm doing here. No one will appreciate it. And then I realized that by the end of the week that there was a lot of interest, and then I was told that it was the most successful Biennale in Tallinn. Okay, it's a young one, but it was really taken well, so it was better. But there was no journalist coming from London. It was never reported in London, where I live. No comment about that at all. The more interesting articles were actually in Estonia, so they were more involved and went for it. Some Nordic, other Nordic reports, I think was Sweden, some in Russia and in the Baltic. But I think in terms of feedback, I know there was a big group of Australian, and I know there were a lot of Australian participants, which was part of my ambition, because Australia is far away from many other Western countries, and but we share a culture, and because it's so far away, not enough people know. So it's we could see the March Studio, but also the winner of the outdoor installation, the steampunk. Part of they were English and they were from London and from Melbourne. So yeah, I lost the question. Yeah,
I think you answered it, I guess.
I think.
Aren, you're mute.
I'm sorry. Okay, now I'm back on. Because what was very interesting also that you also had a focus on VR and VR technology. Maybe if you can elaborate on that, where lies the beauty in digitalism?
Yeah, the AR and VR, which I'll explain in a second, was a real ambition to include it. First, because we're all interested, I think everybody, not just architects, we're all interested in augmented reality and virtual reality, and today even more so. So I was very keen to have, cutting edge exhibition and to have things which are kind of contemporary, even just as an approach. But it's kind of more expensive sometimes more expensive to produce and be able to handle. And we were lucky to get a big grant from HTC Vive, for the Paula Stunden. She's not in the documentary, but she had a very important installation in their exhibition. So Paula Stunden, thanks to her, we got the scholarship, the grant, and so she could make a really interesting job. And her project was the Talking Trees of Tallinn, but actually it was directly about each of the installation in the exhibition. So it was an augmented reality experience, and she called it mixed reality because it's the object and the augmented reality. So, but the ambition was to have a different experience, a virtual reality experience of each of the project. So you could see, you know, if it's like some architecture or Mermot Studio or Fujimoto, Sou Fujimoto installation, you can actually get into it. You can be inside, not just looking at the installation and upstairs looking at all the renders and the 3D. You can actually experience being within it. And we show it again at the AA because I thought it was also there to tell a story, not just the story of each of the projects, but also to enhance and to make it clear that it's a wonderful tool for every office. You know, every office, if they learn the software and the, you know, how to, you can few sketches and you can actually show your client the project from within. It's an incredible tool. You have to have some, you know, an artist like Paula Stunden who did an amazing job, but that was incredible. So that was an extra that I wanted from the very beginning, but we got it really at the end in time for the exhibition. But the Space Popular, who actually took part in the documentary, I was very interested in their project as well as an AR project. We knew from the very beginning it won't be, you know, just a physical installation. It will be something physical with their augmented reality. And I think, and we had a third one, which is not in the documentary. We had the I'm in between there. Manfredini, Elena Manfredini, Atelier Manfredini, who she had an installation that she called a wall, flower wall, and it was quite incredible. So there was a print of a poster that she prepared before. We printed it, and then you put the goggles, right, the Oculus, and you could enter. You can be part of nature. And not only that, there were bees and flowers, and beyond the flowers and nature, there were bees and birds and butterflies going in the field. So it was incredible. I think, you know, that kind of installation we all wanted in our house, don't we? So that was planned actually to be like the exhibition there at the Biennale was in the museum. The exhibition was like a street. And so Elena Manfredini installation was as if it's like a bus stop in the street, right? Could be there on the wall, and people could enjoy it and make the stay there more interesting. So yeah, I was very interested in AR and VR, and you know, today I think the lockdown days, you know, give a tremendous opportunities for all these artists to be there a lot more than with physical architecture.
Mm-hmm. Was the topic or the exhibition somehow related to the city, to Tallinn as well, somehow?
Yes, very much so. I love Tallinn. I fell in love with Tallinn while visiting Tallinn, and so I wanted I thought I'll go there 4 times, and after the second time I wanted a lot more. Because I love going there, and I knew that I was very interested because in Tallinn, because I heard it's culturally very interesting place. I like the people. I felt very much at home there, so I was very comfortable there. But also, it's very well known. Anybody you read in Wikipedia about Estonia and Tallinn, they're a very high-tech society. So I wanted a lot more high-tech things in the exhibition, and I can tell you the high-tech guys, they do so well. They don't need us. I couldn't pursue almost anyone to, they develop, Skype it's an Estonian invention. What we are talking, I'm talking to you now through Skype. But they were the first to actually activate courier robots in England, in Milton Keynes. There were 400, maybe a lot more now, doing deliveries. Could be great these days, right? No infection. There are other robots designed by many others, but actually they make it work first. They have a lot more high-tech inventions. They're very, they invest in it since they left the Soviet Union, and they take it very seriously. And it's part of the energy there. They're so contemporary in an approach and energetic and efficient. It's all part of it. So I wanted a lot of that in the exhibition, and I managed at the end to find one. One installation was done with a professor from Tartu, that he was part of a larger team, that they developed the first robot that worked like a plant. So it works like it kind of climb, it imitates the way passiflora plant kind of go up towards the light. And actually it's a robot. So we did tendrils. We created something together, which was quite, I like that. So it was also like a hint on nature, but it was robotic. So I was very pleased to have, and there was a big, a very large photograph of an incredibly good photographer, Tallinn, a photographer from Tallinn, Arne Masik, which was, it enhanced the atmosphere in the exhibition, which was the enlarged photographs at the end of a forest when the snow melted. So, I think it was very important for me to relate to Tallinn and to make it really kind of global, because we all share a lot of value system, and it's quite interesting to do it this way, I thought. And the poetess in the symposium was a local girl. And we had two exhibitors from Estonia. One was Kadarik that was talking in the documentary, and he has his practice with Tüür. And then the one whom we haven't seen was Kadarik Kirke. So there were two Estonians in there, actually three with a robot.
We have another question coming in, and also to the people watching, keep on posting your questions to Yael Reisner, and we will ask them live here to you, such as the question from Vigan Zecker on YouTube, who is asking about the cultural bias of seeing beauty, and if there's a difference in culture and background, and also asking how can something be beautiful to someone and ugly for someone else?
Okay, so first I'll start there. I think actually it's a deep conversation if something beautiful for me is ugly for somebody else. I don't think so, and neuroscientists argue about it, as mathematician, so there's a lot to learn about it. It's part of the cultural bias, because it's not really true, and it's part of the cultural bias. So now the cultural bias is related to a specific culture, but the Western culture is large enough, and we all have this cultural bias. I would say that for sure in the Anglo-Saxon world, meaning the English-speaking world, it's a unified cultural bias, and I think Europe suffer from the same cultural bias. So it's in German languages, and I think the Nordic maybe less. They still kind of have some affinity, but they are influenced by that too. And I was thinking a lot, if to include China or not, because we are all looking at architecture from China, and I think they also have cultural bias that actually related to if it's the early communism or but I thought it was too complicated, and although I wanted to include Chinese, I thought it will be too complicated, and then although I think they share this cultural bias, but I'm not going there. So I think a big part of the world suffer from this cultural bias, and which means that it's a 20th century cultural bias, which I think is kind of 80 years old, and it's all to do with beauty is not progressive, is all what I said actually in the film, the documentary is kind of bourgeois. You know, it's not of interest. It's interested in the subjective, and 20th century was interested in the objective. And part of the reason why I thought there's a hope is because I read in a lot of different disciplines, there's a new interest in the subjective. Even in AI and artificial intelligence, if you look at researchers, even on the internet, just look at this, you'll find that talking about intuitive artificial intelligence, which was meaning the human presence, the human judgment should be there. So, and as an augmented, you know, we live actually in the augmented age where we believe in the importance or relevance or the benefit of augmenting, I would say, robot with human judgment. So, so that's why I think beauty matters in you, and because I can see from different disciplines, beyond the ones that I gather for the conference, for the symposium, I can see that so many more talk about the resurgence of subjectivity and what does it really mean. And you know, yes, beauty is subjective, but a lot of subjective decisions are objective. So it's another complicated layer. So I hope I answer the question about cultural bias.
Selma Mustafa from YouTube is asking, which book would you suggest to read to learn more about beauty and its matter?
Okay. So first, of course, the catalog of the Tallinn Architecture Biennale. It's not expensive, and it's a beautiful book as well. It's beautiful design, as well as the content is really high level. That's right. At the same time, actually, before I won the competition for Tallinn Architecture Biennale, I was guest editing Architectural Design magazine, the AD magazine by Wiley, published by Wiley, and it was published on the same week as the Tallinn Architecture Biennale. I don't have it. It's near here. I can show you. So that's the magazine. And it's very different from the Biennale because it's not an exhibition. It's a series of texts. And so there was Samir Zeki is a neuroscientist there. Graham Harman is the philosopher there, but we have a different mathematician. Actually, the mathematician there is a mathematical, it's for mathematical physics. From string theory is Robert Dijkgraaf. He's a Dutch mathematician who is the head of a big Institute for Advanced Study. And it's a fascinating article about beauty and truth. And so there are different people and different articles, and then 13 different architects. So Sejima, who a lot of people adore, talking about beauty with her. Jenny Gang, the American, who is building more and more and more, and she's talking a lot about building relationship through architecture. And John Wardle, I start mentioning Australia. So John Wardle just won a gold medal in Australia. He's extremely known in Australia, but not that known out of Australia. Everybody should know him. He exhibited in the last Biennale, beautiful project there. And so there were the three kind of more established architects, but there were a lot of much younger architects taking part there. You should look for it. So so that's another book. Then it's the AD, but it's almost like a book. So this is the second. I think Graham Harman, the philosopher, write about the return of beauty in the OO. So it's the object-oriented ontology. People should start taking interest in that. He writes very clearly, and if you are interested in philosophy, that's the thing to read. Rona Aharoni writes lots of books. Very enjoyable read. His books is on mathematics, poetry, and beauty. My book from 2010 about the troubled relationship, it's actually give the core of the problem. is, I think, defined well there. And I'm sure there are more in the American scene. There are more books and more people interested in that. I mentioned it in the AD. You can have a look there. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there are more books on beauty. Yes, this is the kind of the latest.
Great. So I hope all of you viewers wrote that down, because I think we still have quite some while to read some good books. And finally, for like a very beautiful last question, Kirke, actually the curator of the satellite program of Tallinn, she's watching. Hello. And she has a question for Yael, asking, please, Yael, name one beautiful piece of architecture.
I can name more than one, but I like to name. Yes, we're talking about contemporary beauty. I think if one is visiting London, one should look for Will Alsop architecture. It's in a building. It's called the Blizzard building. You won't be able to go in, but you can see everything from outside. You can see through the glass the concept, the building, the whatever there is incredible building. I think it's really beautiful. Interior space is incredible. And I like to mention a building that irritates a lot of people, but because of cultural bias, I think, it's Frangiri, the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao. A lot of people kind of just talking nonsense about it. Anybody I know who visited it is like saying it is beautiful. So I like mention two, but there's a lot more. The list is much longer. No hardship there.
We have one last question.
Yeah.
From YouTube, Lucas Hoops is asking, you seem to suggest that notions of beauty can shift according to the moment in time, and yet beauty is not something limited to cultural bias. What is beauty fundamentally? So a very easy last question.
Yeah.
Small one.
I agree with part of it. I agree that beauty is not a singular idea. I keep saying it. It's my view. So we have, what we know as the beauty from the Renaissance days, and we have beauty from today, and they will be very different from each other. But we know when we see it, we know it. So I think in creative work, and I'm interested in the contemporary condition, and there's a lot there to suggest, and but certain things are very beautiful from the past, and when they're extremely beautiful, actually, the neuroscientists will say that 60% of the people will agree they are beautiful. Then it must be beautiful. So it's the power of statistics. But we have, and we are very familiar with the fact that, certain things we thought are beautiful, and after years, it's not as beautiful as I thought, because it's cultural. We can't separate it from our, from architecture is more complex than the neuroscientists will explain, than biological beauty or beauty in nature. That we can, it's much more complex, but still there's a point.
So educated somehow as well.
Yeah. I hope I touched upon something as an answer.
Great. Thank you so much. I think this was a beautiful ending, or a beginning, for all of the people to rewatch this documentary and read all the books about beauty and read the catalog of the Tallinn Architecture Biennale. And sort of we have come to the end for now for this session. Thank you so much, Yael Reisner, for your time and joining us.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. And we have to keep our mind open. Thank you.
Exactly. And speaking of keeping our mind open, the next Tallinn Architecture Biennale is coming up next year, 2021. And the organizers of the Biennale are still looking for open-minded proposals. And sort of to make a shout out to all of you, if you have an idea or you know someone or you're in a group, go on tab.ee, and there you can find all information to maybe become the next curator. And then maybe in 1 year you will be with us here on the live stream as well, just like Yael was with us.
Thank you.
So also thank you to all the students from the EKA, from the Estonian Academy of Arts, who made this production with us and who earned their ECTS points very hard. And thank you to Kirke and Jaanika, who helped us, Mies, manage this documentary and also gave us the chance to make our own exhibition as part of the satellite program of the Biennale. And thank you also to Teresa and Chiara from our team who joined us, and Teresa for collecting all the comments that we got from you worldwide, and for Dominic for the technical production of the live stream.
Thank you.
And at the last thing, we can only say that we see each other hopefully all again next week on the 7th of May for the brand new season start of Mies UK. So our branch in London has a new episode. And I can tell you so far already that one of the interviews will be an exclusive interview of Space Popular, which has been part of the Tallinn Biennale.
Excellent.
So see you all next week and stay safe.
Thank you. You too.
From Vienna.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.